So, you're the new guy around here, huh? Thought you'd come see if I wanted to hook up with you, right? Well, if you can prove to me you're not all show, then maybe I'll think about it. I'm waiting. Nice. So where are we going?
Hey everyone, how's it going? Going back to the past can be a fun adventure, and while it can be a trapping in itself, it's also an opportunity to explore with a newer perspective in contrast to what you had as a kid or when you were younger. I've been doing this on and off with certain games, and it always gives me new epiphanies or new realizations. If I'm lucky, then my opinion on something that I revisit won't change, or at the very least, I can recognize its problems while still loving it the same. I feel this way with the Half-Life series, Doom, Need for Speed, Midnight Club, Halo, Garry's Mod, Mountain Blade, Dark Souls, the older Call of Duty games, the names go on. But unfortunately, this method of exploration also means you'll revisit stuff you used to like, only to find out that it really wasn't that good to begin with, or that it was a pretty average game that you enjoyed more in the past. In the world of 2000 street racing games, Need for Speed was a huge heavy hitter, and the underground games were spearheading the import tuner craze that was occurring back in the day. Other studios would also chime in and try to secure the bag too. Some were fantastic like Juiced, Street Legal Racing Redline, the Tokyo Extreme Racer series, to some extent the Midnight Club games, the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift game, which is actually really good for a licensed game, and a few more. One other title though would also manifest in 2004, which I still think is one of the best years in gaming ever. But the game that I'll be talking about isn't exactly the reason for why I think that way about 2004. In fact, it's a game that I'm somewhat mixed about, and even in spite of certain properties, it just doesn't really hold up that well. And that game is Street Racing Syndicate. Street Racing Syndicate was Namco's attempt at putting their chips on the import tuner street racing table, looking at what the underground games did and seeing what they could do better. The thing is though, making an attempt and executing doesn't always lead to a satisfying result, and what we end up here is a game that's enjoyable on its own and for its asking price. But ultimately, the game is mid as fuck in comparison to what came out in the same year as well. You know, the same year where you had releases like Burnout 3 Takedown, Tokyo Race Driver 2, Crash and Burn, Driver 3, Richard Burns Rally, Colin McRae Rally, Flat Out, Gran Turismo 4, Need for Speed Underground 2. Do you see where I'm getting at here? Why on earth would I ever play this game when I could just play any of these instead? Sure, when it comes to the selection of how many girlfriends you can have, then this game is S-tier material in that department, but that's really about it, honestly. It sounds like I'm already hating the game, and to be honest, I don't, contrary to what I've just said already. It's just not the cream of the crop, and it still has some of that 2000s racing charm at least that's missing in the AAA scene today, and can only really be found in the indie scene. And despite the game being pretty mid in general in comparison to everything else, I did still have a relatively good time with the game for the most part anyways. So let's take a dive and watch some videos. I mean, let's talk about the game. Story? Forget about it. There isn't really a story at all. And even if there was one, it's so fucking bare bones that there are 3 cutscenes in the game. 3. I am dead serious. And no, the street race cutscene doesn't count. Basically, this guy tells you to race the skyline for someone while he bails someone out of jail. For one race, you get to experience one of the best cars in the game, and after that, it's gone, and now you're given some money from the split to buy yourself a new ride. From here, you have a few choices available to you, but to unlock the rest, you'll have to do more races. Anyway, when you actually look closely at the selection, you'll realize that you don't actually have that much to select from, contrary to how many cars the game claims to have. The large number in itself is actually more based on the variations of the existing cars. The copies of the cars that you see are just like different variants of the same car. So say if you look at the 350Zs or the Skylines or the Supras or the RX-7s, there are different versions that you can obtain. But when you take those versions out of the equation, you actually have less choices overall, and on that note, the selection is pretty weak. It mainly consists of JDMs with some outliers, the kind of cars that you would have seen in the first Underground game. I picked the Toyota MR2, which in my opinion is kind of underrated, especially when compared to the main stars of the show. Once you're set, you get out there and start racing. The main progression in Street Racing Syndicate will come in the guise of crew meets, basically, which are just like meetups where you initiate series races and win those races, as well as earning respect. Outside of that, you have street races, which are repeatable, and depending which car you have, can be easier or harder, but either one will net you more money or less if you have, say, a weaker car, and more if you have a better car. These races are usually a sprint to the finish, and winning that race will net you cash, and the opposite happens if you lose. You lose the wager, you lose the money. Then you have the respect challenges, which consists of getting a girlfriend, and to get said girlfriend, you have to complete a challenge, and then she immediately becomes yours without, any effort whatsoever, besides the driving that you're doing. This was actually the game's biggest selling point. The hot women that you get to watch in the game through their images or the videos that you can get where they dance to the game's music for you, this was the main thing that the game was remembered for. Another element that was added to the import tuner craze at the time was also how they integrated women into, like car shows or like games or anything related to that sort of thing. You had sweet rides and hot chicks together, something that was appealing for straight dudes in the 2000s and kids that felt like they made an amazing discovery. In a way, this approach actually worked for Street Racing Syndicate, and it's, again, why people remember the game still, because of how far they went with this sort of stuff. You don't really see this kind of stuff anymore in the newer Need for Speed titles or in other racing games, but there was plenty of this back then. There are 18 girlfriends you can get, and the extent of the relationship is that they appear at the start of the races, and if you win a series, they'll give you a video to watch at the warehouse. Most of them have several videos, and each one with less clothes. Oh, and if you lose a series, then they just break up with you, so there's that too. Now, 18 girlfriends may seem like a lot, and usually I'm like one at a time, please. But this is one of those games where you're just going to have to put aside your monogamy because you're going to need all of those girlfriends just to get enough respect points to do all of the races, including the final ones. Now that the girlfriend topic is out of the way, we can finally get to the boring and annoying shit in this game, the crew meets. This is your main progression in the game, and is essentially the game's career, so to speak. Each crew will have their own drivers and you participate in series races. In these races, you can do wagers to earn more cash, but it's optional. What's not optional though is winning the race and earning max respect each race. Getting 250 respect points will net you 1,000 for the race, and each series is worth 3,000 altogether. But that's only if you max out the points in each of the races, otherwise you just get most of the points. The later crew meets will require a certain amount of respect in order to do the events in the first place. If you don't have enough, too bad. To get points, you have to do things like drifting, near misses, leading in the lap, clean racing, jumping, etc. You can lose points if you lose a position or hit something, so it's in your best interest to race as clean as possible. The races on their own can be fun at times, but get frustrating once you start trying to max out all of the respect points for each series. Some races it can be really difficult to accumulate any points because there's either not enough opportunities to rack up points or the opponents are too fast and you can't afford to lose your position. When you finally unlock the last crew meet, the requirements are very high, and to do the last 3 races, you have to have 77,000 respect points. Normally this wouldn't be an issue, but how you get to that number certainly is. You know how you max out at 250 when grinding respect points in the race? Guess what? You can't get any more than that once you hit that max cap. And you'll always cap at 1,000 for each race and 3,000 for each series. This means that even if you get all of the girlfriends and do all of the other crew event races, including the sanctioned ones, you need to go through almost all of those races and max them out if you haven't, just to reach the 77,000 mark. So to even be able to do the final races and beat the career mode, you have to get 250 lousy points for almost every race that you've already done. If there were other ways to grind respect while having to do all of this backtracking, then it wouldn't have been as bad. But shit like this just ruins the experience for me, and what's even worse is that even if you do manage to find a way to get enough respect points or max all the races, the payoff is very underwhelming. I think it was designed in this manner to hide just how shallow and empty the career or street mode experience is. But everything else outside of the shitty crew race system is more enjoyable while still being somewhat mixed. The customization is honestly not too bad. Performance parts are dynamic and you can really crank your ride to go really fast if you want to. Body kits are limited, and from my experience, it just boils down to one choice. But wheels and spoilers are decent in this selection, as well as the vinyls too. Also, the fact that you can colour the decals is a nice touch, and it's something I don't recall the early Need for Speed Underground games even being able to do unless you count just black and white. For the lazy ones, you can auto-customize your car if you don't want to go through the effort. Also, you can go to the warehouse and select different girlfriends or different cars, or go to the showroom and pick up a new ride. How do you access this? Well, on the map when you're free roaming. Free roaming? Yeah, it's there, but it's so dull and boring that it may as well not even be there. Why? Because all of the activities can be warped to on the map right from the beginning. This eliminates the incentive to explore the place entirely, and the places consist of 3 cities: Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and Miami, and yes, they converge on the same map. I barely explored because I could just go to the activities by fast traveling, so I was never really given a specific reason to use the open world exploration in the first place, unless you count the cop chases. And that's another thing that the Underground games lacked, and this game at the very least does have them. The problem is though, is that they never show up in the races, and you can only initiate chases in free roam, which is boring anyway. Not having them in the races was a wasted opportunity, and the chases themselves are never worth it because you don't really get anything out of it. And if you manage to get caught, you cop a fine and that's it. If you were able to obtain some respect points, then there'd be more of a reason to do the cop chases, but the fact that you can't get any respect points just kind of baffles me, because wouldn't that be something that warrants respect? I mean, at least in Most Wanted, you always get something out of the cop chases. So why not in this game? Oh, and when you free roam too, the transitions between the cities are so jarring that you can, say for example, drive to Los Angeles at the dead of night, go through a highway, and then reach Miami in broad daylight. I would have preferred them having their own separate maps, honestly, like you see in the Midnight Club games. That way they could have been fleshed out more. You also have cruise mode, which is basically the game taking over the controls for you and you just watch the car drive itself. It's nothing too special, it's just there if you want to, just sit back and just look at your ride while it's driving. The arcade mode consists of quick races, checkpoints, time trial, and Iron Man. Quick races are just the street races that you do with the game's preset cars, including the main 4, which look really good by the way. The Skyline and Subaru are my personal favorites. You pick a car and select a city and track and then start racing. Checkpoint has you going through inexcusably narrow checkpoints with a timer, and going the wrong way will fuck you over. Iron Man is a gauntlet of street races where you have to keep winning in order to win the whole event. And doing the Los Angeles races was like 12 or so events in a row, which was ridiculous. Going the extra mile though in these events nets you bonus cars that you can actually use before you even start the street mode. In fact, if you win any of these cars, you can just start the street race mode and you'll already have a ride. As for the car handling itself, it's hit and miss. When you're racing, you get a decent sense of speed and sometimes handling is not too bad, but where it turns to shit is when you start doing the turning and the steering in certain corners. This is where the jank comes in, and there were also times where my car would just spin out of control for no reason and I'd be left wondering why that happened, and sometimes it would actually screw me over. It's not great, not terrible. I would rate it a 3.6 Rontgen out of 10. The car sounds are pretty shit, and a lot of the times I could barely hear it, which made using manual a pain in the ass, especially with the soundtrack playing loudly over it, which by the way has some good tracks and some agonizing ones I wish were never there. Graphically, the environments do have some of that underground atmosphere, at least in Los Angeles anyways, but the most detail that you'll get in this game beyond the 18 Milkies are the cars themselves, which look decent for a 2004 game, I will give it that. I'm going over a lot of this stuff without elaborating on it too much because when you put it all together, the game is just pretty average, even for 2004 standards. Street Racing Syndicate was just superseded by so many better racing games that were released during that year and afterwards, and even before that too. It's not even really that bad of a game, it's just an okay game, or, average, that still at least has some of that 2000s arcade racing written into it, and it has a decent soundtrack with decent car selection, discounting the derivatives and decent customization, and that's just it. Like, at best I can say that the game is decent, and at worst it's just an average, okay game that doesn't really give you much of a reason to play it over anything else. I'm glad to have finally played it though for the first time, and as a kid I did know of this game, but I just never got around to it. Doesn't seem like I missed out on anything though. At the very least though, it is dirt cheap, and if you're looking for something that isn't great or terrible, but just a lower quality street racing game from the 2000s, then yeah, give it a try. I mean, honestly, it's not going to cost you that much anyway. It's like a can of Coke. But here's the real advice. Give the game a try. Play it, and then when you get bored of it, drop it, and then go play Juiced instead. That game is so much better. Also, the replay system in this game is absolutely terrible. Thanks for watching.